Welcome back for another Telltale Books video. I'm starting another new author series about a very remarkable science fiction author who mostly wrote during the 1950s. Most people knew him as Cordwainer Smith. His real name was Paul Myron Anthony Linebarger, and he was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in July 11th, 1913. And so this video is going up to celebrate his birthday anniversary, actually his 110th anniversary. And he died in August 6, 1966. So he again is a classic science fiction author. He doesn't date back to the Golden Age, only because he didn't try writing during the Golden Age for some reason. His very first story, which I'll be talking about tonight, was published in 1928, and then nothing is heard from him until 1947, when he published a novel called Rhea, and then he published a couple more novels after that. Now, those three novels were not science fiction, they were not fantasy, they were just mainstream style novels. And then finally in 1950 he published what most people saw as his first science fiction story, Scanners Live in Vain, and created he dropped a bomb on the science fiction community because of the incredible, science fiction is known for its imagination. Weird worlds, weird aliens, weird technologies. Cordwainer Smith outdoes them all, at least for his day. He had an amazing imagination. And it's just unfortunate. He only published 44 works, and those 44 works, 3 of them were mainstream novels. 1 work was a science fiction novel, or actually 2 science fiction novels, The Under People and Norstrilia. And the rest were all short works, so not all that prolific, but he only wrote for, he was only publishing science fiction for 16 years before his death. So, he didn't have a lot of time to publish a whole lot. And he had a full-time job aside from writing. He worked for the State Department, of all things. And he was born and raised in China, which gives him a very different perspective on the world, which he brought to his science fiction. Something that other science fiction writers weren't really putting into their science fiction, that different kind of culture. So his very first story, though, which fits into his instrumentality of mankind, which is kind of like a future history, a far future history. And there even is a timeline for all his stories, it's published in this book, The Instrumentality of Mankind, which is where I'm reading the story, which is called War Number 81-Q. And if you can get a hold of a copy of this paperback, I would imagine it's in some other books as well about Cordwainer Smith. There is a whole timeline for his Instrumentality of Mankind stories, and this book contains 14 of those stories. So it's a good selection, including War Number 81-Q, which was published in June of 1928. More than 20 years before he would publish any more science fiction. And it was published in a magazine called The Adjutant, Volume 9, Number 1. Now, I know nothing about that magazine. It's a very, very short story, 3 pages in this book. Synopsis. A war is being fought between two countries. The names have been changed from current day nationalism, but one is clearly Asian Chinese based, and the other one is clearly North American based. But instead of fighting wars in a messy way of just rolling into cities and bombing the hell out of everything, instead what they do is they fight in an arena. This is going to sound familiar here. A lot of people have done this since, but I think this is probably the first time that somebody proposed this idea. They're fighting in an arena, and what goes into the arena are airships, like dirigibles, but they're remote controlled, radio controlled. So the pilots are safely out of harm's way. There's no way they can get killed. And they are controlling the airships. Typically one pilot per airship, but in the case of the Americas, they only have one pilot. So he has to try and control 5 airships at once. And the airships go into this arena and they battle, and whoever has the last airship still floating wins. So nobody gets killed. There's a lot of imagination here, especially for 1928. Remote controlled airships, safely moving war into an arena where everybody is spectators of this, everybody's watching it and applauding and stuff. It has shades of a lot of different science fiction stories that have been published since then. I've heard this idea many times, but never as far back as 1928. The story is as engaging and interesting and fascinating as it is, and well written. For such a short story, you can't get into a lot of characterization, and of course everything else has to be kept to a minimum. He still brings this world alive pretty well. And this is another story that I feel has held up very well over time. It doesn't feel like it was written in 1928. It feels like it could be contemporary. It feels like like somebody writing steampunk could have done this story today. But it's still, I would like it to be longer. I honestly would. And for that reason, because it is, not that I feel a story necessarily has to be more than 3 pages long, but if you're going to keep it that short, you got to make sure that it really, really works at that length, and that people aren't left wishing it were longer. And that's how I feel here. I wish it were longer. I wish it were at least 20 pages long and going into a bit more detail. That probably would have kicked it up to be a top tale. As it is, once again, so close but not quite. So I do recommend reading this story. It is an amazing little story, and worth the 5 minutes it's going to take you to read it. So track down a copy of this book, or one of the other Cordwainer Smith rather books that are on the used market. I'm not sure if there's anything currently in print for Cordwainer Smith, but it's worth looking into and worth reading. This is a really, really great author. Everything I've heard about him just puts him on a pedestal above the rest of the authors of the 50s and 60s. So definitely worth your time investigating this guy, and I will be investigating everything he's written that I can get my hands on. And number 2 is one of those non-science fiction stories It's a full novel. It's called Rhea, published in September of 1947. And I do have a not a first edition. I do have a copy of the book. No, it is a first edition. This is that's a mistake on there. I do have a copy of Rhea that I can read, and I'll be showing that to you in the next Cordwainer Smith video that I do. I'm really getting a lot of these authors, so none of them are going to be coming up every week. There's going to be a little bit of time between each of their stories. But I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed hearing about War number 81Q. And I hope you'll come back for more of Cordwainer Smith and all the rest of the videos I do. Like us and subscribe to us. And I will be back for the next video.